And I now invite the permanent representative of Pakistan, His Excellency Munir Akram, for the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Allow me, Excellency, dear friend, to congratulate you on your election to chair the second committee at this historic session. I extend my sincere felicitations to the other members of the Bureau. Pakistan aligns its statement with the statement delivered by Guyana as chairman of the Group of 77 in China. Mr. Chairman, today we are facing the gravest global crisis since the establishment of the United Nations. COVID-19 has triggered the deepest recession since the Great Depression. 100 million people will be pushed back into extreme poverty. The gains of decades of development will be lost. Mr. Chairman, as usual, it is the poorest countries and the poorest people within countries who have been hit the hardest by the pandemic. I hope a vaccine will be available soon. Everyone, everywhere, must have equitable and affordable access to the vaccine. Despite Pakistan's financial constraints, Prime Minister Imran Khan decided to inject over $8 billion, that is 3% of our GDP, to protect the poor and keep the economy afloat. Our strategy of smart lockdowns has fortunately controlled the spread of the virus. However, domestic efforts are not enough. While the developed countries have generated a stimulus of $13 trillion to revive their economies, the developing countries are struggling to find even a fraction of the $2.5 trillion that they are estimated to require to recover from the crisis. As early as last April, my Prime Minister proposed a global initiative for debt relief as one of the quickest ways to create fiscal space for developing countries. We later co-chaired the group on debt under the initiative launched by the Secretary General and the Prime Ministers of Canada and Jamaica. Mr. Chairman, in our view, the options for urgent action on which agreement should be reached include the following: extension of the debt suspension initiative by the G20 for at least another year, covering also the distressed small island developing countries. Net inflows from multilateral development banks equal to or more than the debt suspension. Cancellation or major restructuring of the least developed countries' debt. Vastly expanded concessional financing through IDA and other concessional sources. Debt buybacks and debt for SDG, climate and health swaps. Private sector participation through the Liquidity and Sustainability Facility proposed by the Economic Commission of Africa. And, most importantly, the creation of at least $500 billion in new SDRs and the repurposing of unutilized SDR quotas for allocation to the developing countries. Mr. Chairman, we must also identify the critical policy actions to build the economy of the future. To this end, the following policy measures would be critical. 1. Restructuring the financial architecture to ensure greater equity and efficiency. 2. A fair international tax regime, as well as a halt in illicit financial flows. 3. Creation of a development-oriented and fair trading system within the framework of the WTO. 4. Investment-led growth, especially investment in sustainable infrastructure to ensure a resilient recovery and realization of the SDGs. A sustainable infrastructure investment facility could accelerate such investment. 5. alignment of the intellectual property regime with the SDGs. And 6, digitalization of the economies of developing countries. Mr. Chairman, we must simultaneously take action to avoid the impending climate catastrophe. With adequate financial and technological support, and utilizing the principle of common but differentiated responsibility, developing countries can build sustainable economic models without sacrificing growth. They can also contribute to the climate goals, for example, through nature-based initiatives such as our Prime Minister's plan to plant 10 billion trees, and by choosing renewable energy as the preferred option, and by ensuring energy efficiency.